The next item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 3551 in the name of Hugh Henry on the NSPCC. Hugh Henry is unable to lead this debate for very understandable reasons, and therefore Neil Bibby will take his place in leading the debate. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I'd be very grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could please press their request to speak buttons now. I call on Neil Bibby to open the debate. 7 minutes, Mr Bibby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, can I apologise on behalf of Hugh Henry for not being able to speak to his motion today. Unfortunately, he has had to attend a family funeral, but he was still keen for this debate to take place. I am delighted to have this opportunity to talk about an organisation which has been instrumental in the fight against child neglect and abuse, and which has been at the forefront of child protection since the 1800s. The NSPCC was established in 1884 by the Reverend Benjamin Waugh, who, having witnessed high levels of child deprivation and cruelty in London, strove to draw public and government attention to the plight of children. Within 5 years, the Society had branches throughout the UK and had changed its name to the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, and has played a major role in changing the law to protect children with the passing of the first Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act in 1889. Since its establishment, the NSPCC has helped more than 10 million children and continues to be involved in groundbreaking programmes, and its innovative strategies aim to find the best, most effective ways of helping children and to use its resources efficiently to reach as many children and young people as possible. Key areas that the NSPCC is making a priority include physically and sexually abused children, disabled children and children under 1. The NSPCC has had a presence in Scotland through its links with both Childline and the Centre for Learning and Child Protection. In 2010, Matt Ford was appointed the Head of Service in Scotland to gather a team of experts to support the efforts of the charity, in partnership with other leading children's charities, to fund and add new services to those already in existence. This year, 2012, heralds a number of new initiatives aimed specifically at helping children and families. Child protection remains at the forefront, with programmes concentrating on the most important issues surrounding those children at greatest risk. Programmes currently being delivered in Scotland include Improving Parenting, Improving Practice and Parents Under Pressure. Improving Parenting, Improving Practice is a groundbreaking new programme being trialled by the NSPCC to help parents to improve their relationships with their children. Renfrewshire is one of 8 areas where the new programme, which is the first of its kind in the UK, is being piloted. The NSPCC believes that neglect arises as a result of poor parenting skills, together with the inability of parents to bond with their children, and holds the belief that early intervention can help parents change their behaviour by helping to eradicate emerging problems before they become long-term issues. Sadly, even in 2012, neglect remains the biggest reason for a child to need protection. The Improving Parenting, Improving Practice programme aims to reduce instances of neglect by helping parents of children between the ages of 4 and 10 years of age to bond better with their children and to have a greater understanding of their need. 2 approaches are being tested, and both are carried out in the family home. Over a 2.5-year period, 1,640 families will be supported in 8 locations across the UK. One approach uses videos to film parents playing a game or getting involved in another activity with their child, and an NSPCC social worker will provide feedback to the parents on what they did well and how to better interact with their child. It aims to build parent confidence and the bond between parent and child. The second approach supports parents who, due to depression, family conflict or problems with their child's behaviour, cannot cope and in turn neglect the child. Through home visits and telephone support, the NSPCC worker will help parents with stress and anger management. The approaches will be evaluated to find out which, if either, is more effective in identifying, tackling and preventing neglect at an early stage. And I'm pleased the evidence will be shared with the Government and their use promoted throughout the UK. Parents Under Pressure is another programme developed in Australia being delivered in Renfrewshire to vulnerable families. It is an intensive home visiting programme which runs for 20 weeks and aims to help parents who are undergoing treatment for severe drug and alcohol problems bond with their baby and improve their parenting skills. The NSPCC is working with families with children under 2.5. A randomised control trial is being used to determine the success of the programme in preventing abuse and improving the parent-child bond. The Parents Under Pressure programme in Australia has proved successful in helping to keep children safe and in promoting a closer bond between parents and their babies. NSPCC programme teams work in conjunction with other agencies involved with the family and hope to reduce the number of babies and toddlers harmed by parents with severe substance misuse problems by providing them with coping mechanisms, care, support and education necessary to help them to enable their child to have the brightest possible future. Child neglect is the most commonly reported child protection concern in the UK, with some studies suggesting that as many as 10% of children are at risk. Such neglect is damaging to children in the short term and in the long term is associated with some of the poorest outcomes and can have ongoing tragic effects from generation to generation. On the other hand, kindness and care is of ongoing benefit, making for a happier society, more dignified treatment and huge amounts saved on health expenditure. Accordingly, the role played by organisations such as NSPCC is a valuable and essential one. I have great admiration for the achievements of the NSPCC, which raises the vast majority of its own funding, and for the relentless work of the organisation in tackling the problems of child neglect by helping to identify children at risk, raising awareness among practitioners and the public, sharing models of good practice, introducing new initiatives and offering early support to children and families. Presiding Officer, I am delighted that one of the pilot programmes underway at the moment encompasses Renfrewshire, and I will continue to ardently support the NSPCC's campaign in its fight against an issue which sadly has become a major feature of life in this country.
Thank you very much. I now call Jamie Hepburn to be followed by Mary Fee.
Thank you very much, President Officer, and can I thank Hugh Henry for having lodged his motion. I think it's very important to have this debate, and I think I'd like to put on record my condolences to Mr Henry for his sad family loss. And can I say, I thought Neil Bibby did a very good job in his place in speaking to the motion. I can also thank the NSPCC for the briefing that they have provided to myself and I think other people taking part in the debate today. I think it's been very helpful in getting prepared for the debate, and I'd also like to place on record my thanks for all the work that they are doing as an organisation. In that regard, though, I do think all of us in the Chamber would wish that we were in a world where organisations such as the NSPCC, Save the Children, Children's First, Bernardo's, the children's organisations didn't have to exist. But a cursory glance at some of the statistics about the prevalence and incidence of child abuse and neglect in Scotland and across the UK suggest that they are very much sadly needed at this moment in time. And indeed, looking at some of those figures coming from, provided by the NSPCC through the survey they undertook, the research work they undertook, child abuse and neglect in the UK today, which involved interviewing a large number of young people across the UK. Some of the figures were very, very stark and indeed very bleak. Indeed, they indicated that 1 in 4 young adults had been severely maltreated during childhood, and more than 1 in 8 children aged 11 to 17 have experienced severe maltreatment by a parent or a guardian. Nearly a quarter of the young adults they questioned had experienced sexual abuse by an adult or by a peer during childhood, and 1 in 9 young adults had experienced severe physical violence during childhood at the hands of an adult. And as Neil Bibby pointed out, neglect was the most prevalent type of maltreatment in the family for all of the age groups that the NSPCC spoke to in compiling that report. they really are, those statistics really are a stark demonstration on the need for the children's organisations such as the NSPCC. And certainly from my own experience as a father, I can only be appalled by the incidents of abuse that has been reported by the NSPCC. And I do very much welcome the fact that the Scottish Government do keep the issue of child neglect under review. Indeed, they published their review, the latest review, just earlier this year. I do want to turn, President Officer, if I have some time, as I say I do, to focus on some of the work that the NSPCC Scotland are doing in the North Lanarkshire area where my constituency is located. And they're doing some good work to try and prevent non-accidental head injuries in babies, because we do know that abused babies are more likely to die from head injuries than any other cause. And I was very pleased to see that the NSPCC are working with the NHS in North Lanarkshire to try and educate new parents on the dangers of shaking a baby, because it is estimated that 1 in 9 mothers shake their babies at some point. And I think we're all accept that it's very unlikely they are necessarily doing so with any intent to cause physical damage to their child, but we do know that it is the case that it can lead to such damage. And of course, this is a programme that builds on experience, the Buffalo programme in the United States of America. And I do understand that the NSPCC will be sharing the learning from that programme with the Scottish Government. I'm sure that can help achieve the Minister's well-stated and sincere ambition to make Scotland the best country in the world to grow up in. Thank you, President Officer.
Thank you very much. I call Mary Fee to be followed by Liz Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to start off by thanking my friend and colleague Hugh Henry for securing this debate today on the motion on the NSPCC. The NSPCC has a long-standing and well-documented history of protecting and helping children when they are at their most vulnerable, starting from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. With prioritisation for the most vulnerable children at its core, and ensuring that its activities are driven by the principles put forward by the Reverend Benjamin Waugh, the NSPCC has contributed significantly to child protection in its 128-year history. Like other members within the Chamber, I am absolutely delighted that the NSPCC is rolling out its trial programme, Improving Parenting, Improving Practice, and that Renfrewshire is part of that rollout. However, the fact that we are debating this issue shows just how far we have yet to go in protecting the most vulnerable in our society. In the 21st century, you would not expect so-called civilised countries, such as Scotland and our counterparts in the rest of the UK, to still have issues such as child neglect or abuse. The NSPCC estimates that around 1 in 10 children have suffered neglect from their parents during their childhood. As of the 31st of July 2001, there were 2,571 children on the Child Protection Register, with an estimated 50% of those children between the ages of 0 and 4. That is why the early intervention element of the Improving Parenting, Improving Practice programme is absolutely key to helping reduce the number of children affected by neglect. Research has shown that those in the youngest age category are those at the highest risk. But let's also look at the issue of those children who are slightly older and may themselves have been in the risk category at one point. At present, the amount of research conducted around young adolescents is nowhere near the same as those children in their early years. It was found that in some parts of the UK, around a quarter of young people who ran away from home did so due to being forced out of the family home, and some had been completely rejected or abandoned by their parents. For some people, it may be that their parents cannot deal with their behaviour, or even that their parents don't have the skills to look after them. For others, it can be that their parents have rejected them due to their religion or even their sexuality. The issues for young adolescents may not be the same as younger children, but it does draw attention to the idea of having a holistic approach to tackling child neglect, and we need to stop the one-size-fits-all model. That's something that the Improving Parenting, Improving Practice programme is aspiring to. It should also be noted the tremendous amount of pressure that's currently on social work departments to ensure that children and vulnerable people are adequately protected. With local authorities making cuts to their budgets, it's imperative we recognise the work being done by the NSPCC and other voluntary sector organisations. These organisations are themselves under budget constraints, but they are also doing more than their fair share. We should also remember that government has a duty, and it should not just be left to charitable organisations. Issues of neglect can stem from the likes of substance abuse and domestic violence, but it would be wrong to suggest that these are the only factors present. In some cases of neglect, poverty is also present. It is not uncommon or unheard of for parents to leave children at home while they go out to work and help support their families. Unable to afford sufficient childcare due to low wages, and local authorities having to cut childcare places due to budget constraints, we can see how the spiral of neglect can and does happen. This, coupled with cuts to after-school and breakfast clubs, parents have to make difficult decisions that may in turn also put them in the care of our justice system, which takes the debate of child neglect even further. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I too would like to commend the NSPCC and the excellent work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Liz Smith to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
Deputy Presiding Officer, could I add my thanks to Hugh Henry on securing this debate and also recognise his work in this important area of a number of years. Few issues could be of more importance to this country than the protection of our children. We can never be too vigilant when it comes to defending the young from abuse, abandonment, exploitation, neglect, poverty and harassment. So it is extremely apt that we should praise the NSPCC for their long and distinguished involvement in protecting children in our society. They have made a very significant impact through a 128-year history. But as we know, sadly, and as Jamie Hepburn has said, that work is becoming ever more demanding. In Scotland today, 90,000 Scottish children live in poverty. 1 in 10 has suffered parental neglect. 1 in 100 has suffered severe physical neglect. And thousands, and I don't think we really know the exact number, are living in households where there is either alcohol or substance misuse or both. So for many children, the sad reality is that Scotland is not a safe, secure country in which to grow up. I have long admired the work of the NSPCC, and no one can have failed to be very moved by the TV campaign which brought home the very harsh reality faced by children across the United Kingdom. But it is the positive work which the NSPCC is undertaking which is making a real difference to the lives of so many children. The Renfrewshire programme, which Hugh Henry has highlighted in his motion, is clearly helping to address the instances of child neglect, but it is also providing positive steps to support parents. And like Neil Bibby said in his opening remarks, this is probably the most important focus for its work. Helping parents and future parents to understand and to respect their responsibilities in the home and in wider society is crucial, and probably the most effective thing that can be done on a preventative basis. As the NSPCC website states, being a parent is one of the most rewarding jobs in the world, but it is surely one of the most challenging. In some communities in Scotland, we are probably now into a third generation of parents, many of whom lack good parenting skills. And that's created a vicious cycle of poor parenting, which in turn has resulted in unacceptable child neglect. And that neglect can occur even as far back as pregnancy when a mother abuses substances. Once a child is born, a parent or a carer can cause neglect by failing to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, or by protecting a child from physical and emotional harm or danger, and ensure access to adequate medical treatment when needed, or to respond to a child's emotional needs. And I'm sure every member of this Parliament will have come across the incidents of child neglect in their own constituency areas. We all know these cases, by their very nature, are difficult and complex, and they highlight the desperate situations in which many children find themselves. So the NSPCC programme has set itself an important goal of supporting over 1,600 families in 7 locations over the UK over 2.5 years, and I'm sure that the Scottish Government will review the outcome of that programme to see what lessons can be learnt. I have been hugely impressed, along with many other members in this Parliament, about the resources which they have online, and I hope the Scottish Government Minister will be able to look at how that first-class help and information can be more readily available. So I'm very pleased, Deputy Presiding Officer, that good progress is being made to improve the child protection area and the inspection regime, which I think is just as important, and how better we can respond to the needs of vulnerable children. And may I once again put on record just how much I think Hugh Henry should be congratulated for bringing this debate to Parliament.
Thank you very much. I now call Liam MacArthur to be followed by Anne McTaggart.
Presiding Officer, can I add my congratulations to Hugh Henry on his motion in an area, as Liz Smith says, where I think he's got a formidable track record, and also thank him for ensuring that despite his unavoidable absence that the Parliament still has an opportunity to debate this serious issue, and congratulate Neil on delivering the speech in Hugh Henry's absence. I think the motion and Neil Bibby's introduction set the scene very well in terms of the breadth and the quality of the work that NSPCC does in this exceptionally difficult area of abuse and neglect. I think the timing of the debate is, I think, fortuitous in that it fits very well with work that the Education and Culture Committee are doing at present, following on from our inquiry into raising attainment for looked after children. We're moving into an inquiry on the decision-making of whether children should be taken into care, and I think a lot of what's come through in the NSPCC briefing will prove invaluable as part of that process, to which we've already received a very, very high volume of contributions, for which I'm personally very grateful. I think, as a number of members have mentioned, the area of neglect is a tricky area. It's clearly the trigger for the greatest number of instances where children are being either taken into care or put under protection orders. But it's not an easy area to navigate. I think I was struck by a quote from Matt Ford, Head of Services at NSPCC Scotland, when he says neglect is unique in terms of child abuse because it often relies on proving inaction, such as not feeding a child adequately, and can require evidence of this over a long period of time. And I think that just exemplifies quite how difficult this area is. I was struck also by the feedback to the child neglect survey, which indicated 4 or 5 principal obstacles to action being taken on neglect, much of which revolved around considerations about the support being provided for parents. And I think we can't lose sight of the need to provide that support, but we do need to look at how, amongst all that, we provide the protection that needs to be put in for some of our most vulnerable children. And that early intervention is absolutely critical. I mean, Liz Smith talked about the need for preventative measures to be prioritised. And I know Neil Bibby, Jamie Hepburn have both highlighted innovative work that NSPCC is undertaking in different parts of the country and drawing, I think, on lessons from elsewhere internationally. I had a briefing in relation to the Minding the Baby initiative, which I think has been piloted in South Lanarkshire and in East Ayrshire, building on work that has been developed initially in the US, and the early signs there are fairly promising. It brings together health and social work support delivered at the home in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy until the baby reaches the age of 2. And I think that demonstrates quite how early in the process we need to be engaged. It's focused very much on the most vulnerable, offering first-time mothers under the age of 25 who are struggling with problems such as depression, homelessness, poverty and potentially violent relationships, providing, I think, pretty intense support and visits. Now, clearly there's going to be a financial implication of that, but as NSPCC point out, babies are most vulnerable in the first few months of their lives, and babies indeed are 8 times more likely than older children to be killed. And therefore, I think the importance of this initiative is very much brought home for me by those sorts of statistics. And the impact of poor attachment also has negative implications for children across the life in areas such as relationship stability, educational attainment, addiction, employment and mental health. So I think it's an investment we really need to seriously be looking to make. I'm looking forward to conclude, please. Certainly, Deputy President's Officer. I'm looking forward to seeing the outcomes of these pilots in the two areas in Scotland, and see whether or not there's a justification for rolling that out more broadly. So I congratulate NSPCC for making a real difference to some of our most vulnerable, and thanks Hugh Henry again for enabling us to have this debate today.
Thank you very much. Now call Anne McTaggart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I also welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate today, and thank my colleague Hugh Henry for bringing this issue of child cruelty and neglect to the attention of the Parliament. I believe that everyone in the Chamber applauds the work undertaken by the NSPCC, and also to Matt Ford, a former colleague of mine from Glasgow City Council Social Work, especially surrounding its new programme, Improving Parenting, Improving Practice. However, it is the job of every politician to look to find effective ways of combating and preventing child neglect. Child neglect is an issue continuously misunderstood in our society. We often assume neglect only takes place in certain types of families. And while the media will always focus on the most extreme cases, the reality is that child neglect can appear in many guises. The NSPCC's own statistics show that 1 in 6 people have been neglected at some point in their childhood. It is our responsibility to target and identify children before neglect becomes an aspect of their lives. While the results of improving parenting, improving practice are pertinent in today's debate, it is only right to note that other projects and trials currently being undertaken by the NSPCC in Scotland. In Glasgow, for instance, the introduction of the New Orleans intervention model, in partnership with the NSPCC, Glasgow City Council and NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, has been of particular success. The models, unsurprisingly, developed in New Orleans as a mechanism which allows professionals to assess whether children should be reunited with their birth family or placed for adoption. When this model was used in the States, the results were startling. It found that children assessed using the model were less likely to suffer abuse or neglect when they had returned to their birth families, and conversely, more likely to settle in well with a new family. The 7-year follow-up of the 80 children exposed to the intervention has shown that on virtually all mental health measures, graduates of the New Orleans intervention are similar to the general population. It is hoped that this model could, in the future, inform child protection decisions throughout Scotland, and I urge the Minister to look at these findings from Glasgow. One aspect that I am sure we are all in agreement about is that preventative measures and intervention at an early age is the key to success. Even before a child is born, its life chances are affected by the situation of its mother. Early intervention must be from the womb, not just from the cradle. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government had taken positive steps in this area. The introduction of the early years framework and getting it right for every child means that we are now catching more cases of child neglect than ever before. But as we know, government strategy is not enough to combat this problem. We also need projects at the grassroots to support the families. For example, Parent Network Scotland, and it's one of its directors, Jackie Toland, who I met recently, has had particular success in Glasgow and throughout Scotland, even as far as Shetland, as far as I'm led to believe, and also was a former colleague of mine as well. She was running support courses for struggling parents. The courses run by the network teach parenting matters and an introduction to curriculum for excellence. The courses are flexible and are delivered in a targeted way to support parents to support each other in a school environment, while at the same time taking into account the needs of the children, parents and the school. Courses such as these allow people to learn necessary parenting skills from their own peers without the prospect of feeling ostracised. I congratulate Parent Network Scotland on their considered approach and would urge the Minister to observe the work that they are undertaking. Presiding Officer, this issue is too important for members to be speaking in terms of party political points. We have made great strides in recent years, but we must do more. We must all work together to ensure that the issue of child neglect is eradicated from Scottish society.
Thank you very much. I now call on Aileen Campbell to respond to the debate. Minister, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I also welcome today's debate and thank Neil Bibby for bringing it to Parliament in the absence of Hugh Henry, and also pass on my condolences to Hugh and to his family. Indeed, I'd like to thank everyone, I think, for what has been a very thoughtful and very constructive debate which seeks to highlight innovative and good work to support children and their families, and I think, as Anne McTaggart says, is far above party politics and is something that we can absolutely unite around in terms of trying to provide the best outcomes for children and young people around Scotland. But I found it particularly interesting to hear more about the good work carried out by the NSPCC in supporting children and young people and their families. And I'm delighted that they continue to be committed to children and family services through the rollout of their new initiative for supporting parents and tackling the issues of neglect. And I'd always be interested to learn more from those outcomes, as others, I think, have requested me to do so. I would also like to collectively recognise all the other third sector organisations for their contribution to children and family services across the country. And earlier today, I visited St Eunan's Primary School in Clydebank with Save the Children to learn more about their FAST programme, and I believe that Neil Bibby has visited that programme as well, and I would certainly encourage any others who are interested to really engage with Save the Children on that particular project. Leah MacArthur, Jamie Hepburn and others have also mentioned innovative, good local practice in their particular areas, and in my own constituency, Healthy Valleys also provides that very localised support to parents and families in Clydesdale. And in response to the points that Anne McTaggart raised about the New Orleans project, I've also met with Matt Ford on that issue and very interested in the work that they are doing there, and think it will be also of particular interest to the committee as well in terms of their look and investigations into the looked after children. But as many of us will know from personal experience of or having other family members who have children, being a parent is the most rewarding but also the most challenging role we'll ever take on. We all want to give our children the best start in life so that they can develop into healthy, happy, confident and successful individuals, ready and equipped for the challenges of adult life. However, I'm also aware of the difficulties that some families and children face across Scotland. And that's why, as Minister for Children and Young People, as well as an MSP and as well as a mother, I'm committed to making sure that we are getting it right for all the children, young people and families by tackling some of these persistent issues head on. As many have noted, neglect remains one of the most insidious child protection problems in Scottish society. And the recent study that we commissioned from the University of Stirling showed the scale and nature of neglect and highlighted that this remains one of the biggest challenges facing our children's services. Now, there's no single simple initiative that will resolve these problems, but a variety of actions taken together can make a huge difference for children and families experiencing neglect. Neglect can arise from a range of different factors and can take an enormous number of different guises, and I think many have, in their contributions, have highlighted that fact, often involving substance misuse, poverty and a range of risk factors that can undermine the ability of parents and families to cope. And I think there was a number of contributors, Anne McTaggart, Mary Fee and Jamie Hepburn, outlining some of the stark figures around this subject. And that's why we're taking a holistic approach to addressing neglect, one based on collaborative working. And this is the approach that lies behind our forthcoming national parenting strategy and underpins the work we have done together with stakeholders to improve the tools, the guidance and support around child protection in recent years. And specifically, we've been piloting a risk assessment toolkit to help professionals protect vulnerable children, and that will be launched soon. Liam MacArthur also spoke about this debate being pertinent to the work of the committee, but I think it's also pertinent to the work and timely for the work that we're doing in government with the launch of our national parenting strategy next week, which aims to ensure that parents get the support that they need when they need it so that they can do their very best for their children. because we know that we want parents to feel empowered, to feel valued, supported and confident in their ability to care for their children. And we're very clear that the National Parenting Strategy will articulate the importance of parenting and parents, because they are the single biggest influencers in their child's life, and will focus on ways that we can all work together to support parents and carers to do their job well. As part of the strategy, we engaged with over 1,500 parents across Scotland, and we've received very strong messages of the support that they need. And in response to Mary Fee's comments about the need to not just look at maybe the early years, but actually look at the whole life course of a child, it will also take on and reflect upon the needs of parents with adolescent children as well, because I think it's an important point that we can't just, when we talk about early intervention, equate that necessarily with early years. So I think that will be a welcomed articulation of the real respect that parents need. But we do also really recognise that poverty has a huge impact upon families, and it was rightly pointed out by Elizabeth Smith, Mary Fee and others about the impact of poverty on children. And I certainly don't want to see any child being born into or condemned into a life of poverty, and it's not acceptable that 17% of our children still live in relative poverty. And we're doing all that we can within the powers that we have to try and tackle some of those things. And our child poverty strategy for Scotland expresses our commitment to focus on the need to tackle the long-term drivers of poverty through early intervention and prevention, partnership and holistic services. And I think we've all coalesced around the idea and the real need to use preventative measures and early intervention measures. And I think that this is a real hallmark of what the government is trying to do. Because the earlier we can spot the signs of neglect, the better chances we have of taking the steps that will prevent the problems from escalating. And certainly, again, that was another message that we got from the engagement we had with parents around the country about needing support and help before a problem became a crisis. And that early intervention approach is also embedded in our Getting It Right for Every Child. And that's also one of the reasons why we're proposing legislation to ensure that early intervention is mainstreamed across public services across Scotland. And that will also be underpinning what we want to achieve with the bill for the children and young people. The consultation closed last week, and it aimed to gather and did gather views from the public and the wider stakeholder across Scotland on our proposals for that legislation. And we hope, and I hope, that along with our parenting strategy, along with the collaborative work that we can take with the third sector and others, can hopefully ensure that we do go on to make Scotland the best country in the world to grow up in. It will take a lot of work. It's not an easy challenge to face, but I think it's one that everyone wants to see happening. And I would congratulate Neil Bibby, Hugh Henry and NSPCC for the work that they're doing to ensure that we can take some small steps towards that greater aim in that journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And that concludes Hugh Henry's members' business on the NSPCC. And once again, thanks to Neil Bibby for leading that debate. And I now suspend this meeting of Parliament until 2:30 p.m.